The story begins in the year 2035, where rapid advancements in technology led to the creation of the World of Connect, a virtual realm so immersive that it felt as real as the physical world. It featured lifelike AI NPCs, breathtaking landscapes, and the allure of swordsmanship and magic that players could only dream of experiencing in real life. These elements drew over 100 million players into this digital utopia, but amidst the wonder, chaos soon unfolded. At the entrance to a massive gate, the ground was littered with bodies. A man screamed in agony as daggers pierced his body, his cries echoing briefly before he collapsed lifelessly onto the ground. A crowd of onlookers watched in shock as the scene unfolded. Standing amidst the carnage was a man with the in-game name Crash, known in the real world as Byo-yan. "Bastard!" one of the remaining men shouted, his voice thick with hatred. He rallied the others, yelling, "He's the enemy of the Empire. Attack him while he's alone!" The group charged at Byo-yan, weapons drawn and fury burning in their eyes. Yet Byo-yan remained calm, his expression unshaken. A system prompt flickered before the crowd, revealing his rank, 13th, and his class, psychokinetic. One of the attackers notched an arrow and shouted, "Die!" As he loosed it, Byo-yan raised 2 fingers effortlessly, deflecting the arrow mid-air. The motion was so precise and swift that the archer barely had time to react, before his head was severed cleanly from his body. "Knights, fire your arrows!" barked the group's leader. A volley of arrows rained down upon Byo-yan, yet, with a single motion he raised his hand, halting the arrows mid-flight. The projectiles hovered in place, frozen, as the knights stared in astonishment. Then, with a flick of his wrist, Byo-yan hurled the arrows back toward them. "Dodge!" the leader shouted in desperation, but it was too late. The arrows found their marks, leaving the knights in disarray. Byo-yan, gripping a dagger, closed the distance to the leader in an instant. The blade moved like a blur, slicing the leader's neck. Blood spurted from the wound as the man crumpled to the ground. The remaining knights, paralyzed by fear, cursed his psychokinetic powers. "What kind of monster are you?" one shouted, his voice trembling. But before they could act, one knight's gaze shifted upward. His eyes widened in terror. "Above us!" he screamed. Suspended in the air were dozens of weapons, swords, spears and daggers hovering ominously. Byo-yan's cold gaze didn't waver as he directed the floating arsenal toward the trembling knights. The weapons pointed downward, ready to strike. The knight cursed under his breath, knowing exactly what was coming next. Byo-yan lowered his hand, releasing the suspended weapons. They flew toward the knights with deadly precision, cutting through them effortlessly. Once the chaos subsided, Byo-yan turned and walked away, leaving a trail of bloody footprints behind as he entered the castle. The bodies of fallen knights littered the ground in his wake. Inside the castle, he encountered guards, but they were no match for him. He dispatched them with ease, his movements fluid and calculated. As he wandered through the castle halls, a question lingered in his mind. What exactly was he searching for? His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of faint coughing nearby. Turning toward the noise, he saw the Pope, frail and aged, leaning against a wall. The Pope looked at Byo-yan and murmured, "So, this is the end?" Byo-yan's gaze shifted to the pendant hanging from the Pope's neck. A realization struck him. It was the very object he had been searching for. The Pope clutched the pendant tightly and spoke, his voice filled with a mix of sorrow and anger. "God foretold the arrival of saviors in this world. But why? Why are there only fighters here? Why have you brought such chaos? You burned cities, slaughtered the innocent, and enslaved countless lives." Byo-yan met the Pope's gaze coldly, then reached out to grab the pendant. "Don't blame me, old man," he said, his voice steady. "Blame the guilds that conspired with the Empire." Just as he took the pendant from the Pope's trembling hands, distant footsteps echoed through the halls. Byo-yan cursed under his breath, realizing that reinforcements from the guilds had finally arrived. Without wasting another moment, he ascended a nearby staircase. The Pope called after him, his voice filled with forewarning. "Remember, everything unfolds as God intended. And you, all of you will pay for what you've done." At the top of the stairs, Byo-yan stood before a massive box embedded with a small circular hole in its center. He slowly placed the pendant into the slot, and as it fit perfectly, a magical light enveloped the room. The box shifted and revealed a hidden underground passage. Descending into the passage, Byo-yan recalled the intelligence he had gathered over the past months. His focus was interrupted as he noticed several items, suspended in a glowing purple light ahead of him. Among them was a book and a collection of other mysterious artifacts. These must be the first mythical items in Connect, he thought. 5 years ago, major guilds had formed, alliances with the Empire, and shattered the balance of this world. Everything he had done over the past 6 months, all the battles, bloodshed, and sacrifices, had been leading to this moment. Bao Yan reached for the items, his mind resolute. He was the last solo player among the top 100, a fact that filled him with equal parts pride and rage. The guilds controlled everything now, but he was determined to change that. No matter the cost, Bao Yan quickly stored the floating items into his inventory, knowing that the guilds would be furious if they discovered he had obtained these mythical artifacts before them. Just as he prepared to leave, something on a nearby table caught his eye. "Is that a game cartridge?" he muttered to himself, picking up the object. The moment it was in his hand, an immense pressure radiated from the cartridge, forcing him to his knees. Pain shot through his body and panic set in. "What is this? A connection error? What's happening?" he thought, his mind racing. Unable to withstand the pressure any longer, he immediately logged out of the game. He woke up with a start, his breathing heavy as his senses slowly returned. He was in his room, but something was wrong. Sitting up, he felt a sharp pain near his chest. His eyes widened when he saw a stab wound, blood staining his shirt. "Don't move," a voice commanded. Bao Yan froze as several men in suits surrounded him. "We've captured Dune. Should we bring him in alive?" The response was immediate, and the man smirked. "Understood." Another man asked, "What did the president say?" The reply was chilling. "He said we only need his head. Kill him." 2 of the men grabbed Bao Yan, dragging him upright. "You should have stayed in your lane," one of them growled. "Did you think being good at a game made you untouchable? That nothing could scare you?" Bao Yan struggled weakly, desperation creeping into his voice. "Please, you don't have to do this," he pleaded. But his words fell on deaf ears. One of the men covered his face, raised a sharp blade, and plunged it into his body. The pain was excruciating. Bao Yan gasped as the blade struck him again and again. Suddenly he heard a frantic voice calling out to him. Sir, wake up! Please wake up." Bao Yan's eyes snapped open, his body jerking upright. His heart pounded in his chest as he looked around in confusion. His hands trembled as he examined them. There was no blood, no stab wounds, only the remnants of the searing panic that still clung to him. "What just happened?" he whispered, his voice shaking. Bao Yan's mind was racing as he tried to process what had just happened. He clearly remembered the agonizing sensation of being stabbed and dying. Yet here he was, alive. A soft groan of pain snapped him back to reality. He turned to see a young woman beside him, clutching her side. "Sir Raoul, are you okay?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. "Raoul?" he thought, his confusion deepening. He didn't recognize the name. As his gaze shifted to her, something even stranger caught his attention. A glowing status panel hovered above her head, displaying her name as Anna and her level as 3. Anna's worried expression didn't falter as she asked, "Should I call a doctor?" "You've been sweating heavily." Bao Yan shook his head slightly, still disoriented. "What is this? Am I seeing status panels in real life?" It felt surreal, as if he were observing something impossible. Before he could make sense of it, a familiar system notification appeared in front of him. Soul successfully settled. Activating Connect's closed beta system. User interface activated. Current number of users, 1. His heart skipped a beat as he read the message. "Are they kidding me?" he muttered in panic. Realization dawned on him. It meant he was now inside the world of Connect. He stumbled toward the balcony of his room, the cool breeze brushing against his skin. As he stepped outside, the vibrant world around him came alive. The wind felt real. The sounds, the smells, everything was far more vivid than when he had played as his avatar, Crash. This is different, he thought. The synchronization, it's off the charts. He recalled the mechanics of Connect. Synchronization determined how deeply a player connected to the game's world. Most players only achieved about 30% synchronization, even after years of effort. Bao Yan, however, had once reached a staggering 90%, a feat that had cemented his position as the game, is rank 1 player for an entire decade, until the major guilds appeared and took over. But now none of that mattered. He glanced down at his hands. This wasn't his old body. It wasn't the character he had spent years building and leveling. That avatar, his ultimate creation, was gone. Damn it, he muttered. All those years of grinding. Yet another thought crossed his mind. Wait, this is the closed beta. The notification said only one user is online. Does that mean I'm the only person here? A flicker of hope stirred in him. If he was the sole user of this system in this world, he could potentially dominate it from the very beginning. Testing a theory, he raised his hand and concentrated. To his relief, the familiar inventory menu appeared before him. It still works, he breathed. He accessed the system's scan function, attempting to gather information about his current state. The system responded instantly. User information detected, locked. Updating data. As the update completed, he felt a surge of pain in his chest, as though his body was adapting to this new reality. He gritted his teeth and endured it. When the system finally settled, he saw his new identity. Raoul Ashton. Raoul, grinned despite the lingering pain. So this is my new life, he thought. With the knowledge and experience from his past, he was determined to climb to the top once again. The game might have changed, but the player remained the same. He was the youngest son of Ashton, the 5th Count of the Reuben Kingdom. Ashton County was the first to fall and connect. He recalled that Ashton County was one of the Reuben Kingdom's most orthodox families. The Count and his eldest son had died suddenly, while the second son went missing. Chaos had ensued when the youngest son inherited the county during these disasters. To make matters worse, the barrier protecting the forbidden area had broken, leading to a failed attempt to stop the monster invasion. Now Raoul Ashton realized that he was the youngest son of that ill-fated family. He looked out at the beautiful city below, knowing it would be ruined in the next 3 years if history repeated itself. Determined, he entered his room, vowing not to let that happen. This is my last chance, he thought. He clenched his fist, the weight of his past life as Baoyan pressing down on him. He had suffered greatly then, and missing this opportunity to live again would be unbearable. His gaze fell on the sword lying on the table. He understood there was only one way to prevent Ashton County's fall. He had to become stronger. A month from now, the county's traditional coming-of-age ceremony would begin. If he could make it to the semifinals, he could gain admission to the Kingdom Academy, where he could train and protect his life. However, as he picked up the sword and swung it a few times, he suddenly collapsed to the floor. His body felt heavy, and he wondered why he was so exhausted from just a few swings. Then he noticed his level, 5. He cursed under his breath. Even the maid is 2 levels ahead of me, he muttered. Realizing how far he had fallen, Raoul knew he had to start training immediately to prepare for the tournament. A month passed in relentless preparation, and the day of the tournament finally arrived. Raoul was amazed by the sheer number of participants. As he surveyed the crowd, he steeled himself, knowing he had to face them all to reach the semi-finals. His coach's words from the grueling training sessions echoed in his mind. It's only been 10 minutes, Raoul. Keep going. Back then, even 10 minutes had left him gasping for air, his body battered by the pain of relentless training. Yet he had endured. Now, standing in the arena, Raoul glanced at his status. He had climbed to Theant level 13, and his stamina was finally prepared for the battles ahead. Armed with a carefully crafted strategy, he felt confident about his chances of reaching the semifinals. Suddenly, he sensed danger. An attack came from behind. Acting on instinct, Raoul quickly dodged, causing the attack to slam into the ground instead. Raoul was surprised to see a fist swing past him, narrowly missing his face. The man behind the attack quickly apologized, saying his hand had slipped. With a mocking grin, the man called him a precious noble and asked if he was participating in the tournament. Raoul immediately recognized the man. It was Dion, his cousin. The group of men standing behind Dion were his other cousins. Dion smirked and added that he had thought Raoul would be crying in his room instead of showing up here. Raoul stayed silent, observing him. Memories of Dion's bullying resurfaced. During swordsmanship training in the past, Dion had always targeted him, and their instructor and even the Count had turned a blind eye. It was all due to the family motto, train like it's real. On the training ground, everyone was treated as equals, and no one was held accountable for injuries. But for Raoul, it had meant enduring Dion's cruelty without any recourse. Dion had taken full advantage of the rules, bullying anyone weaker than him, especially Raoul. You should withdraw while you still can. Dion sneered, his voice laced with fake concern. It won't be just one bone broken this time. I'll break every single one in your body. Dion then instructed his cousins to step aside and let Raoul pass. making a show of it. "Go on, little noble. Run along and cry again," he taunted, laughing loudly as he walked away. Raoul stood frozen for a moment, clenching his fists tightly. He swallowed his anger, but silently vowed to crush Dion in the finals. Later that evening in Ashton Castle, the butler entered a grand room where Count Melvin Ashton, Raoul's father, sat reviewing documents. The butler carried the official report for the day's tournament. Melvin glanced up and gestured for the butler to hand it over. "Are there any promising participants this year?" he asked, his tone casual. The butler opened his mouth to respond, but Melvin's eyes widened as he scanned the list. "Where's Raoul?" he asked, unable to mask his surprise. The butler replied politely, "Young Master Raoul returned to his room after dinner, my lord. It seems he used up all his strength during the qualifiers." Count Melvin leaned back in his chair, a proud smile spreading across his face. "That boy," he said, chuckling softly. "He really made it. He's my son after all." Though Melvin had never forced Raoul to train, knowing the boy was weaker than his brothers, he had kept a watchful eye on him. A month ago, when Raoul began training for the tournament, Melvin had noticed his determination. At first, Raoul had barely lasted 10 minutes before collapsing from exhaustion, but he had never given up. Melvin had seen his son endure relentless bullying during training due to his frail body, yet he had deliberately refrained from stepping in, understanding that if he helped Raoul, it would only bring his son further shame. Count Melvin had deliberately waited for Raoul to stand up for himself, believing that real growth would come only through self-reliance. However, Raoul's progress had far exceeded his expectations. Smiling proudly, Melvin decided that once the finals were over, he would personally go to see his son. The day of the finals arrived, and the atmosphere in the arena was electric. The audience was restless, shouting for an exciting match and urging the fighters to end it quickly. Amidst the chaos, a frustrated voice from the crowd yelled, "Make it fun already." On the battlefield, Raoul stood panting, his breath heavy with exhaustion. Across from him, his opponent Edmund cursed loudly. The so-called weakling in front of him simply wouldn't fall, no matter how many strikes he delivered. Edmund attacked relentlessly, swinging his blade with increasing fury, yet Raoul managed to block each blow, narrowly avoiding being hit. The audience murmured in disbelief, watching as Raoul endured attack after attack. "Why isn't he going down?" someone shouted from the stands. Another voice added, "He's been holding out for so long. How much more can he take?" Amid the rising tension, a supportive cheer rose above the crowd. "You've got this, Raoul." Edmund's frustration boiled over. His strikes became wild and furious as he growled, "You little rat, stop running away and face me." Raoul, still focused, parried another of Edmund's attacks. With a quick slide backward, he created some distance, keeping his blade steady. "You're a disgrace to the Ashton name," Edmund sneered, swinging his sword once more. But Raoul remained composed. Blocking the strike effortlessly, he smirked and replied teasingly, "Sorry, what did you say? Couldn't quite hear you over all your missed swings." The comment drew chuckles from the audience, further irritating Edmund. He pressed on, his strikes growing more erratic, but Raoul parried each one with precision. Again, Raoul slid back, positioning himself for the next exchange. A spectator, clearly frustrated, called out to Edmund, "Just finish him already. I've got my whole salary riding on you." Hearing this, Edmund's demeanor changed. His playful arrogance shifted to cold seriousness. "Enough games," he growled, his voice echoing across the arena. Raising his sword, Edmund channeled his mana, forming a glowing energy blade. The crowd gasped at the sight of his mana sword, a skill that signaled he was ready to end the fight. "This is the end for you, Raoul Ashton," Edmund declared, his voice filled with finality. The audience gasped in shock at the sight of Edmund's mana sword. Several voices shouted warnings to Raoul, urging him to dodge, as being hit by such a powerful attack would guarantee defeat. Edmund smirked confidently, his voice booming across the arena as he swung his water-powered skill toward Raoul. "This is your end. Die." To everyone's astonishment, Raoul stood firm, not even attempting to dodge the attack. A deafening explosion erupted at the center of the arena, sending a shockwave through the stands and leaving the spectators stunned. As the smoke began to clear, all eyes were on the center of the battlefield. The referee stepped in between the two fighters, raising his hand. "The match is over," he declared, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "The winner is Raoul Ashton!" Cheers erupted from half the audience. while the rest sat in disbelief, unable to comprehend how Raoul had managed to win. Edmund tossed his sword aside and stormed toward Raoul, his face a mix of anger and confusion. "This must be a mistake," Edmund protested, glaring at Raoul. How could he be declared the winner? If the match hadn't been stopped, I would have— "Silence, fool," the referee interrupted sharply. "If the fight had continued, you would be dead by now." Edmund froze, his confidence shattered. His gaze dropped to Raoul's blade, which was positioned precisely where his neck had been during the final attack. Realization dawned on him. Raoul hadn't been standing still out of inexperience. He had been calculating, waiting for the perfect moment to counter. Fear gripped Edmund as his legs gave way, and he collapsed to the ground. Raoul approached him with calm composure. Leaning in, he said firmly, "After the tournament, we'll need to discuss your lack of respect for Ashton County." Later, Raoul returned to the castle, where Anna greeted him with a bow and a smile. "You fought well, my lord, please rest," she said respectfully. As soon as the door shut behind him, Raoul's calm demeanor broke. He threw his hands into the air and shouted in pure exhilaration, "I did it! I actually won." He quickly opened his status window, eager to see the fruits of his hard work. A system notification appeared. Swordsmanship. Mastery, beginner level 9. Raoul grinned, his chest swelling with pride. My plan worked, he thought. He had deliberately chosen to fight stronger opponents for longer durations, leveraging the game's mechanics to maximize his experience points and mastery gains. He clenched his fist triumphantly, acknowledging his strategy's success. His chosen hardcore mode, which removed the revive option, came with significant risks but also offered high rewards. The experience multiplier had worked in his favor. Opening his updated status, he read the details proudly. Level 19, hardcore. Classes, swordsman, psychokinetic. Affiliation, Ashton County. Title, Ashton County's youngest son. Raoul's attributes were as follows. Strength, 22, agility, 25. Stamina, 19 intelligence, 15 willpower. Terikor mana 29, spiritual power, 35 senses 30. He also possessed unique traits like psychokinetic Meister S+, royal lineage A, and 3 other unknown traits yet to be unlocked. Raoul acknowledged that leveling up this much in just 1 month would have been impossible in normal mode. However, thanks to the high-risk, high-reward hardcore mode, he had achieved significant growth. Most importantly, his 5 unique traits intrigued him. He understood that psychokinetic Meister was a trait he inherited from Vaughn, while royal lineage was specific to Raoul himself. He anticipated that his remaining traits would unlock as he continued to level up. With that in mind, he resolved to test these abilities in his upcoming matches. As the tournament progressed, Raoul won every match cleanly and skillfully. The audience was astounded, unable to believe that Ashton County's youngest son had made it to the grand finale. Many speculated that he must be incredibly lucky or using some sort of trick. But Raoul knew the truth. Connect civilians were unaware of the player's powers. Returning to the castle after his semi-final victory, Raoul sat in his room, contemplating his strategy. He decided to keep his psychokinetic ability a secret until other players began to appear. Confident in his acting skills, he believed he could successfully conceal his true power. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. A voice introduced itself. It's Ivan. Raoul invited him inside, and Ivan immediately inquired about his well-being. Are you injured? He asked with concern. Raoul reassured him, I'm fine. The priests and healers were on standby, after all. Ivan placed a hand on Raoul's shoulder, his tone serious. Don't let your guard down, my lord. There are wounds that no healer can mend. Raoul paused, touched by Ivan's genuine concern, something he wasn't accustomed to in his past life. He acknowledged the sentiment with a slight nod before shifting the conversation. Did you bring the document I asked for? I handed him the requested papers and asked cautiously, Are you certain about this, my lord? He hesitated before adding, It involves Dion. Raoul interrupted firmly. There's no need to worry. I'm confident I'll win. Ivan gave a respectful bow, expressing his trust. As he left, he couldn't help but reflect. Raoul's confidence reminds me of Count Melvin's youth. But Dion is not an easy opponent. Meanwhile, Raoul examined the document Ivan had brought. It detailed Ashton County's betting system, which supported participants in the tournament. Placing the document on the table, Raoul smirked, thinking, This is enough to secure my place in the family. All that remains is defeating Dion. The host's voice echoed through the arena, announcing the start of the final match. The crowd erupted in cheers and jeers. Half of them cheered for Raul, urging him to win with his skill, while the other half shouted, mocking him to prepare for a crushing defeat at Dion's hands. Raul stepped into the arena. Dion sneered, calling Raul a weakling. I don't know how you made it this far, but I'll make sure you regret every second of stepping into this arena. Soon you'll find out how worthless you are when you're crawling with your limbs cut off. Raul yawned dramatically, unfazed. Are you done stretching your tongue, or do you need more time? He replied with a smirk. Infuriated by Raul's nonchalant attitude, Dion clenched his fists. Meanwhile, Raul, though calm on the surface, released a powerful violet aura, startling the audience. Gasps erupted, and someone shouted, That's overwhelming mana! There's no way Raul can match Dion. Dion glared, but Raul's thoughts were elsewhere. He's all bark, Raul mused, analyzing Dion's stats. Dion Ashton, level 42. Class, Expert Knight, Sword User. Affiliation, Ashton County. Title, Ashton County Star and Sword Genius. Stats, Strength 52, Agility 41, Stamina 43, Intelligence 18, Willpower 14, Mana 32, Senses 21, Talent Grade B. A talent grade of only B? Impressive for now, but this is his limit, Raul thought, hiding his disdain. The host's voice echoed, officially starting the match. Dion shouted furiously, I'll kill you, you coward! He lunged at Raul, his sword flashing in the light. Raul leapt into action, jumping high into the air and appearing above Dion in an instant. Dion's eyes widened in surprise as Raul swung his sword downward. Their weapons clashed violently, the impact echoing throughout the arena. Both fighters strained against each other, neither willing to let their sword give way. Raul gritted his teeth and pushed harder, forcing Dion to slide back to avoid the full force of the blow. Showing off, are we? Dion spat angrily. Raul stayed silent, his mind focused. His movements are below my expectations. So much for a genius. They exchanged blows rapidly, attacking and blocking in a flurry of strikes. Raul quickly realized that Dion's strength, while considerable, was predictable. Dion angrily swung his sword in a wide arc, but Raul dodged effortlessly, his calm demeanor only frustrating Dion further. Why won't you just stay still and fight properly? Dion growled. Raul blocked another strike with ease and smirked slightly. Oh, I see your attacks just fine. Before Dion could react, Raul tripped him with a swift kick, sending him face first into the ground. Gasps erupted from the audience as Dion scrambled to regain his footing, his face red with rage and embarrassment. Trip me? Dion snarled, releasing a powerful aura once again. I'll kill you, he shouted, his voice trembling with rage. Raul tilted his body to the left, effortlessly dodging Dion's attack. Is that all you've got? A mana sword? With all that mana flowing through your body, this is the best you can do? He thought. The audience gasped as Raul smoothly disarmed Dion with a single strike, sending his sword clattering to the ground. Raul raised his sword, releasing a blue and black aura that pulsed with overwhelming power. That's it? Raul said, his voice cold. This is boring. You're really nothing after all. Dion's face turned red with fury. I'll kill you, he yelled, charging at Raul again. But Raul calmly sidestepped, tripping Dion once more. You've got anger issues, Raul said casually, shaking his head. And you fall for the same trick every time. Dion rolled on the ground, humiliated. Raul stood tall, looking down at him. Look at yourself. You're a disgrace to Ashton County's name. Furious, Dion scrambled to his feet and charged again. Raul, unimpressed, delivered a powerful punch to Dion's face. The blow sent Dion staggering backward before he collapsed to the ground unconscious. The arena fell silent. The audience stared, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. Raul turned to the referee and gestured toward Dion. The opponent is down. Are we continuing or is this over? The referee, snapping out of his shock, stepped forward and raised his hand. The winner of the Ashton Coming-of-Age tournament is Raul Ashton. Cheers erupted from the audience. The crowd chanted Raul's name, celebrating his unexpected victory. Raul, still catching his breath, stumbled slightly. He smiled weakly, happy with his win but aware of his low stamina. His supporters rushed to his side, immediately calling for a healer. As the healers began tending to him, the system interface popped up in front of Raul. Quest complete. Coming of age tournament. Rewards. Experience points, 300. Coins, 300. Random skill book, grade D or lower. Extra rewards. Experience points, 50. Grade D stat points, 5. Random skill book, grade D or lower. Raoul couldn't help but grin as the healers worked on him. With this, I can finally make it to the Kingdom Academy, he thought, excitement bubbling within him. Watching from the stands, Ian turned to Melvin. The young master has grown so much in just 1 month. You must be proud of him, my lord. Melvin stayed silent, his gaze fixed on Raoul. He knew Raoul had played with Dion in that fight. If Raoul had achieved this much in only a month, then he wasn't just talented, he was a genius. Melvin's thoughts were interrupted when Raoul looked toward him. With a wide grin, Raoul waved high at his father. Melvin met his gaze, nodding slightly. He knows, Raoul thought, his chest swelling with pride. He knows I'm good enough to go to the academy now. Melvin silently watched Raoul as he left the castle. Later, in the main hall, Melvin called Raoul to speak privately. You can't go, Melvin stated firmly, leaving Raoul stunned. Why? Raoul asked, his voice filled with confusion. You told me that reaching the semi-finals would be enough. That was situational, Melvin replied. From what I saw, you still need to stay here longer. You collapsed after the match, Raoul. That proves you're not ready. Raoul straightened his back and confidently retorted. Father, haven't you always said the sword is a lifelong journey? I'm going to the academy to learn more, just like you taught me. You can't stop me. Melvin stood still for a moment, stunned by Raoul's determination. A smile crept onto his face. You've grown, Raoul, he admitted. Then, standing up, he unsheathed his sword and released a powerful aura. But if you really want to go, you'll have to get past me. I won't go easy on you. What will you do now? Melvin asked, his eyes sharp. A month later, Raoul sat inside a carriage with knights trailing behind. As the forest passed by, he reflected on what had happened. When his father challenged him, he accepted it without hesitation, charging at Melvin. Melvin had teased him mid-fight, asking, Is that all you've got? Before easily deflecting Raoul's sword and releasing an even stronger aura. Let me show you real swordsmanship, Melvin had said before striking Raoul with a force so overwhelming that he passed out. When Raoul regained consciousness, Melvin stood over him. That was just a glimpse of what I can do, Melvin said. Raoul, however, knew it had been Melvin's full strength. He recalled that in the world of Connect, the fall of the Ashton County began with Melvin's death. I won't let that happen, Raoul thought, clenching his fists. I'll meet his expectations, get stronger, and protect my family. As Raoul departed, Melvin had stood at the castle gates, watching him leave. He remembered their final moment on the training ground. How many times have you tried now? Melvin had asked. You should give up. But Raoul had replied, I'll never give up. Smiling, Melvin had acknowledged Raoul's persistence. That's worthy of the Ashton family's dignity. When Raoul attacked, Melvin noticed something surprising. Raoul had changed the trajectory of his sword mid-swing, grazing Melvin's face. Raoul had been frustrated at the small wound, even with psychokinesis, but Melvin had smiled. It's time to admit you're no longer a child. You're a proud swordsman, Raoul. Go and witness the world. Now, as the carriage stopped for a break, Raoul asked Philip, How far are we from the destination? Philip, a seasoned knight at level 92 with the title of Swordbreaker, replied, At this pace, we'll arrive in 5 days. Should we pick up the speed? No, Raoul responded. The soldiers need to train along the way. We'll keep this pace. Philip nodded. Understood. Raoul assessed their group. Including himself and his servants, his family had sent 50 people. Among them were 3 regular knights, including Philip, 6 trainee knights, 15 recruits, and 20 cavalry members. All of them had potential talents rated at grade B or higher. The numbers and skill levels aren't bad, Raoul thought. But we'll need to get much stronger to stop the fall. A man named Jake approached him, reporting that the carriage maintenance was complete and they were ready to move. Raoul praised Jake for his good work. Do we really need to bring this many people to that place for a month? Jake asked curiously. Philip firmly told Jake to stop questioning their young master's orders, adding, You'll understand when we get there. Jake, though more confused, chose to stay quiet. Raoul knew why he was taking them to the free city of Maya. It was one of the first city's players, went to after finishing the tutorial. The city had numerous quests, hidden items, and mana usage limitations to prevent beginner players from being massacred. Most importantly, it offered infinite resources, making it a haven for players. God's Domain, a region near Maya, was filled with monsters ideal for grinding. This is perfect, Raoul thought. I'll level up the knights faster here. As the carriage rolled closer, the system popped up with a notification. System update. New features unlocked. Connect community. Guild category. New quest. Starting line. Adventure and skill collector registered. Raoul's eyes widened. The new quest appeared the moment he entered. Mia. He had assumed most features would remain locked until the official launch. But now he realized there might be more to unlock if he met specific requirements. A knock on the carriage door interrupted his thoughts. Jake informed him, "You can meet the mayor now." Raoul nodded and replied, "Of course, let's meet him." Meanwhile, in the castle, the mayor of Maya, Raldo, asked, "Who has come?" His butler replied, "The youngest son of County Ashton, Raoul Ashton, has arrived with 50 of his people." Raldo frowned slightly and asked, "The third son? The one they say is weak? What's he doing here, out for some fresh air?" After a moment of thought, Raldo waved dismissively. "Let him in. The Ashton family makes good money selling monster materials. I'll see if I can extract some from him." The butler bowed and replied, "Understood." Moments later, the doors opened. Raoul entered with a calm yet commanding presence. He greeted Raldo politely, and the mayor responded with a warm welcome. "I sincerely welcome you to the free city of Maya," Raldo said, shaking Raoul's hand. Raoul smiled and thanked him, then took the seat offered. However, as their conversation began, Raoul quickly noted Raldo's insincerity, his fake smile betraying his true intentions. Ronaldo asked Raoul what had brought him to Maya. Raoul replied that he had heard there was an excellent place to train in the city. Ronaldo smiled and said, "Of course, you've come to the perfect place. Maya is the safest place for training." Raoul, however, responded, "It can't just be any ordinary place. I would like permission to enter the cursed forest." Ronaldo's expression changed to one of shock. "The cursed forest? That's too dangerous, especially for someone as..." He paused and quickly added, "young as you." Raoul smiled faintly and replied, "Just as I expected. I suppose I have no choice but to throw away the 500,000 gold. I plan to offer as a gratuity into the river." Hearing this, Ronaldo's eyes widened in shock as Raoul placed the bag of gold in front of him. Ronaldo immediately grabbed it, his face lighting up. "Ahaha, I was only joking. For someone as capable as you and your knights, the cursed forest should be easy. You have my permission." Raoul nodded with a smile. "I knew a generous mayor like you would understand." As he left the meeting, Raoul thought to himself that the real work had just begun. Now it's time to grind, take all the rewards, and rise to the top of Connect. Later, Raoul, Philip, and Jake walked through the streets of Maya. Raoul observed the city carefully. He thought about how Maya had been built for Connect players, but since it was still a closed beta, there were no players except for him, Raoul Ashton. Because of this, the city was in a crisis. Accommodations, large stores, guild buildings, and other facilities stood empty, vastly disproportionate to the small number of residents. The land prices had dropped dramatically because of it. But Raoul had a clear purpose: real estate. He knew that if he acquired the cheap lands in Maya now, they would eventually be used for luxury homes for nobles, guild houses for players, and apartments for common players. He also knew that these lands would one day be worth over 100 times their current price. Raoul smirked to himself, confident in his strategy. When the players come in and war breaks out, as I remember it did, the city blessed by the gods will become the perfect shelter. He remembered that in the past, money could easily be made by simply lending out land, but he also realized that this alone wouldn't be enough. Considering the upcoming war and potential risks, he needed to be even more prepared. In his previous life, the major guilds had immense financial power, and he couldn't do anything to compete with them. But this time, he vowed it would be different. Later, Jake, sweating nervously, asked him if he just needed to sign at a particular spot, addressing him hesitantly. Raoul looked at Jake in frustration and barked, "Everyone else has signed already except you." "Just sign it," Jake stammered. "But my mother told me to always be careful when signing papers." Raoul shook his head in irritation, and the lady at the desk collected the documents. She informed them that including Raoul, A total of 51 people had registered for the guild. Raoul smiled to himself, proud that he had established the very first guild in a world, without players, a guild that was not only the first, but also the most advanced. He glanced at his people, knowing that as guild members, they would now receive assistance from the system. Excitement bubbled in him, as he anticipated their confusion when they realized the benefits. Meanwhile, Jake stood off to the side, nervously muttering under his breath, "My mother is going to kill me for this." Later, at the Battle Association's Mira branch office, Raoul confidently announced, "I'm next." The lady at the counter greeted him warmly and asked how she could assist him. Raoul replied, "I'm here to look at some skill books. Tell me, what's the highest rank you have available?" The lady explained, "Our branch offers skill books up to rank C. However, only VIP customers can purchase rank C skill books." Raoul raised an eyebrow. "And what are the requirements to become a VIP?" The lady explained, "You can either earn the status through contributions to the association, via quests, or by making significant purchases. However, accumulating the required amount through purchases alone would require a substantial investment." Raoul pressed further. "How much?" She replied, 10,000 gold. Without hesitation, Raoul placed a bag of gold on the table and said casually, "That's not much. Show me the D-rank ones first." The lady, now beaming, asked, "Which category of skill books would you like to see first? Sword, bow magic, or shield?" Raoul smiled. "All of them." Later, as they left the branch office, Jake was panting heavily, struggling to carry the swarm of books they had purchased. "Are you sure we need all these books?" Jake asked, clearly exhausted. Raoul glanced at him and replied, "You may think it's a hassle now, but these books will help us advance to a much higher level." He guessed they were well-written and descriptive skill books. But Jake questioned if they couldn't only train through books at the beginner level. Philip nodded in agreement, suggesting they could have bought power armor with the money spent on those books. Raoul, however, assured them not to worry and to be patient, promising they'd understand everything tomorrow. Later, when Raoul arrived at his apartment room, he looked at the swarm of books stacked in front of him and started to wonder if he had gone overboard. He knew that players had limits on the number of skills they could use, meaning most players couldn't utilize various skills effectively. He opened his quest window, recalling the moment he woke up in Raoul's body. At that time, there were 2 unknown items in his inventory, leaving him curious about what they could be. Despite his efforts to open them, he couldn't click on or use the items. However, after receiving the quest yesterday, he discovered that he could finally use them. Raoul opened his inventory and saw one of the items, the sealed skill dex. He guessed that the reward for the quest must be the activation of the skill dex. He looked at the system, which displayed the collector quest. Its unknown grade intrigued him, and the description instructed him to collect at least 10 skill books and register them in the skill dex, offering extra rewards based on the type of skill books. The reward for completing the quest was the activation of the skill dex, while the extra rewards included unlocking traits and acquiring skills. Without hesitation, Raoul grabbed one of the books, realizing he needed to open the dex and hold the skill book. As he did, he noticed the register option, and the deck book began to move on its own, surprising him. A strong purple light emerged from the deck book and flew directly into the other book. Words appeared from the deck book, and he let go of the other book. Astonished that it had worked, he noticed that the sliver of mana in the book was now gone, but registering all the books one by one seemed like it would take forever. Raoul wondered if there was a way to register them all at once. Suddenly, the books around him flew into the air, shocking him. Once again, a strong purple light emanated from the deck book and flew toward the books floating in midair. Moments later, the books fell to the ground, and Raoul flipped through the pages of the deck book, amazed at what had just happened. The system notified him that he had completed the quest. The skill decks, which were categorized as rare, had been activated. For the extra reward, he unlocked the skill collector trait, which was rated X, and the copycat skill, which was rated S. He clicked on skill collector and saw that its effect was to activate the skill dex. Then he checked copycat, which slightly increased the chance of acquiring skills from a skill book. He also noticed that copycat was currently at the beginner mastery level. Its effect was to steal skills from examined opponents, with the examined skills being registered in the dex. As mastery improved, he could acquire higher-ranked skills, and the power of the stolen skills increased. He thought it was an overpowered ability, since it allowed him to steal and use someone else's skills. The system showed him that the skill decks were of a rare grade, upgradable, and bound to him. Its description stated that it was a replica of the mythic item skill dex, which held records of ancient skills. These records would reset when crossing dimensions, and the dex would regain their true power upon achieving special requirements. Currently, it had recorded 525 skills. He realized this was the mythical item he had received right before his death. Some parts of his past life, like his psychokinesis trait and items, had carried over with him, but his skills had been reset. Moreover, this was only a replica of the original item. The only remaining unknowns in his inventory were the 3 Great X traits and 1 item. He couldn't help but wonder what kind of power they held. The next morning, the knights were panicked to see the system. They shouted questions about the status window and the thing called guild chat, even suggesting they needed to see a priest. On the other hand, Bernard the butler welcomed him warmly. Raoul, with sleepy eyes from a night spent reading through the skill decks, greeted Bernard. He asked if Bernard had explained everything to the knights, and Bernard confirmed he had followed the instructions. Excitedly, Raoul asked Bernard if he had tried the skill book. Bernard nodded, and Raoul's eyes sparkled with anticipation. Bernard was a loyal servant of the Ashton family and Ivan's stepson. Having worked for the county from a young age, Bernard had been personally taught by Ivan, while Bernard, his excellent memory and efficiency were reasons. Raoul had chosen him. There was more to it. Bernard released a gust of wind from his hand, making Raoul exclaim in amazement. "I knew you could do it," he said enthusiastically, realizing Bernard possessed the power to control the wind. Bernard humbly replied that he was flattered by the praise. The system displayed Bernard's details. Age 27, level 21, classes, servant, beginner, windwalker. Affiliations, Ashton County, the First Guild. Talents, administration, management, wind power. Potential talent grade, A. Stats, strength, 17, agility, 18, stamina, 24. Intelligence, 53. Willpower, 46. Spiritual power, 23. Senses, 41. Bernard's unique traits included sharp manager, cold head, and like the wind. He knew that Bernard might lack in certain stats, but he had great talent for being either a servant or an asur. Having completed his preparations, he told Bernard to get ready. Bernard, confused, asked him what for, and he replied that they would leave as soon as the knights were accustomed to the system, their destination, God's domain, the cursed forest. Later, in the cursed forest, an ogre hurled its massive axe at him, splitting the ground in the process. However, he dodged it with ease and mocked the ogre, saying, "Too slow." He launched his fist toward the ogre's head, but before it could connect, the ogre's head exploded, landing lightly on the ground as the ogre's body collapsed. He called out, "Come out already!" A swarm of ogres emerged from hiding, shouting that he was a strong human and must be killed. Their leader ordered them to attack, and the ogres charged at him all at once. Unfazed, he positioned himself and smirked. "Bring it on," he challenged. The cursed forest, part of God's domain, is not just a grinding zone. God's domain refers to the entire city of Mira. Within the city, players are blessed. If injured, they heal, and if they die, they revive. This makes Mira the ultimate sanctuary. However, the cursed forest operates under different rules. In the forest, the blessings apply only to monsters, so their numbers remain constant regardless of how many are killed. Humans, on the other hand, cannot revive in the forest, nor can they leave with items obtained from monsters. If civilians attempt to take such items outside, they turn to ashes, reinforcing the notion that the forest's treasures are sacred and belong to the gods. However, players, with the system's assistance, are exceptions to this rule. They can freely carry their spoils out. As Philip observed the battle, he asked Jake why he was talking when their young master was the one fighting all the ogres. Meanwhile, their young master fought relentlessly. When only the ogre leader remained, the beast demanded, "What is that power?" In response, he simply raised the weapons, scattered across the battlefield using his ability, and asked, "You mean this power?" The leader watched in shock as the weapons flew toward him and shredded him into pieces. Calmly, he declared, "It's called psychokinesis," while Jake stood beside him, equally astounded. Jake commented that psychokinesis was quite a convenient ability, but Philip scolded him, telling him to stop talking and keep skinning the ogres. Jake sighed, muttering that he hadn't come all the way to Mira for this kind of work. Still, he admitted that they had made good progress with their training. Jake called out to him as he was busy collecting the ogre's blood. Laughing, he thanked Jake and Philip, saying that their progress was only possible because of everyone's help. He encouraged them, adding that they could all grow stronger by studying the skill books. Philip, reflecting on his words, thought Raoul was right. He recalled swinging his dagger forward, using the hand of Susan's skill to slice an ogre in half. Raoul asked Philip how it felt, explaining that this was exactly why he had prioritized skill books over power armor. Philip replied that it was amazing, marveling at how quickly he had learned a skill. Still, he wondered how Raoul knew about this strange ability in the first place. At that moment, the system displayed a guild chat notification. Philip read it, his expression turning serious. Surprised, he immediately told Raoul to check the guild chat. When Raoul looked at the screen, his face darkened, and he fumed with anger. "I saw it too," he said coldly, adding, "We're going back to Mira. Now." Meanwhile, back in Mira at their apartment, chaos was unfolding. A man pointed his sword at one of Raoul's men and sneered, "I should have done this earlier." Without hesitation, he stabbed Raoul's man, smirking as he remarked, "It's been hard holding back after seeing Ashton's kids strutting around." Another man, holding a bloodied sword, called his brother, saying, "You should have listened to me earlier. We could have finished this long ago," as he stabbed another of Raoul's men. One of Raoul's men, struggling on the ground, gasped out, "Why are you doing this?" But before he could get an answer, a third man slashed him with his sword. Turning to his brother, he asked mockingly, "Didn't our great-grandfather always tell us to be mindful?" Then he added, "Don't forget, we're all here because they dared to make a scene." The man named Ramon, Randall Sixcount's first son, sneered as he stabbed another of Raoul's men. Beside him stood Jerry, the second son, and Cale, the third. The wounded man on the ground glared at Ramon, spitting out a warning, "You'll regret this." But Ramon simply laughed, stabbing him repeatedly before pulling out his sword. The man screamed in agony. Laughing maniacally, Ramon said, "Tell Raoul to hurry up and come back. We've got business with his young master too." Ramon remarked that it was strange how they kept reviving, glancing at the man on the ground who was healing, calling them bastards. Jerry, laughing, told his brothers they should take care of that Raoul kid the same way. But Cale interrupted, reminding them that noble families weren't supposed to point swords at each other in the free city. Ramon dismissed it, asking Cale what was the matter. He pointed out that they could always deny it and questioned what anyone would do about it. Ramon also suggested that in the end, they could just crush the Ashton family. Excited, he turned to his brothers, saying that maybe their great-grandfather would even compliment them for doing so. But just as he finished speaking, Ashton's head exploded into pieces. Cale, shocked, called out to his brothers. They turned around to see Raoul standing there, coldly asking, "How dare you?" He added that this was an offense against Ashton County, and they would have to pay for it with more than just worthless deaths. The brothers looked at him in surprise. Jerry, furious, asked how he dared touch a son of the Randall family. Cale, equally confused, asked what the knights were doing and how they had even arrived. One of the knights, trembling as he pointed his sword at his neck, explained that they had thought the Randall family were the main force of the Ashton family. Meanwhile, Philip and Jake stood firm, swords pointed at the Randall knights. Philip calmly reported to Raoul that they had surrounded the Randall knights, as ordered, and made sure there were no civilians nearby. Bernard and Jake stood quietly, watching the enemies as Raoul praised their work. Using his psychokinesis, he lifted his injured men into the air, suspending them in mid-air. Raoul then ordered Bernard to take the injured men to the shrine, to which Bernard respectfully agreed. He opened his inventory and pulled out his sword, stating that he would take care of the rest himself. He knew that the Randall family was similar to the Ashton family. Both were among the 5 warrior families of the Reuben Kingdom. However, unlike Ashton, the Randall family didn't have a long history. The 5 warrior families had been reorganized, with the Randall family joining the others to form the current 5 families. When the current lord of the family, Count Hudson D. Randall, reached the swordmaster stage, the Randall family, with its short history, had to find ways to secure their place. They consistently produced great knights, earned respect, made significant contributions, and crushed their opponents. Their primary target was Ashton County, which had lost its power due to not producing a swordmaster in a long time. The Randall family saw no risk in agitating them, as the Ashton family had little political influence. Many of the conflicts between these two families across the kingdom were started by the Randall family, and everyone expected Randall 6 County to win, given their numerous sword masters. The people of Randall believed the same outcome would happen here. Jerry, who was observing Raoul, wondered about his unusual strength, particularly when he noticed that Raoul had pulled a sword out of the air. The knight behind him, who had a sword pointed at him by Philip, slowly reached for his own sword. However, he noticed too late, and turned just in time to swing his sword at the knight, making the knight cry out in pain. The Randall knights were shocked by the turn of events. Jake calmly put his sword back in its sheath, mentioning that their young master had said he would take care of them and ordered his men to put down their swords. One of Randall's strong knights, seeing that they were really sheathing their swords, wondered if they were insane, believing it would be better to fight. Cale, furious, charged toward Raoul, asking if he was going to fight them alone. He swung his massive mace backward to gain force, preparing for the attack. But just as he moved, a sharp sword slash flew toward him, cutting Cale in half before he could strike. Cale shouted in pain as he fell, and Jerry called out his name in worry. Jerry, enraged, cursed at the knights, asking why they were just standing there. The leader of the knights, frustrated, slowly pulled his sword, saying that he guessed it was time for him to act. He explained that he had hesitated, because he didn't want to bully a 15-year-old, but with his comrades falling, he couldn't stand by anymore. The system displayed the man's name, Jeremy, a 37-year-old level 65 man, classed as leader of guard knights and beginner sword expert. His affiliations were Randall 6 County and Randall Knights. His potential talent was grade B, and his stats included 66 strength, 72 agility, 68 stamina, 48 intelligence, 33 willpower, 70 mana, and 55 senses. His unique trait was brutality, graded as C. The other knights, seeing their leader raise his sword, followed suit. He knew that Jeremy was Randall's family's main weapon, known as the rapier, and he guessed that the men surrounding him were the elite knights. As Jeremy and the knights aimed their swords at him, he analyzed their strength. Jeremy's level was 65, and the other elites were at level 60, while his own level was only 45, making it unlikely he could win in a direct confrontation. One of the knights taunted him, asking why he didn't stop now, thinking he had done enough. Another knight said they had let him be, but not anymore. Ignoring them, Raoul suddenly appeared in front of the knight, catching him off guard. He then slashed the knight's body before tightly grabbing his sword, raising it backward to gain force. Raoul activated his aura and attacked with his bear strike skill. One of the knights asked what he was doing, but Raoul just slashed the man's stomach, making him bleed and scream in pain. Jeremy then jumped toward him, appearing right in front of him to attack. Raoul was surprised but managed to block Jeremy's attack in time, though he was pushed back by the force of it. Jeremy asked his man if he was okay, and the man fearfully replied that he was fine. Jeremy couldn't believe that 2 of his elite knights had gone down so easily. He remembered hearing that Raoul was weak and couldn't wield a sword properly. Jeremy pulled out his other weapon and told Raoul that he was different from the rumors, and now had to get serious. He pointed his sword at Raoul and told him to bring it on. Raoul studied Jeremy and noticed he was holding both a parrying dagger and a rapier, making him wonder if Jeremy was using the Randall. Viscount's sword skill called Shooting Star. Jeremy smiled, appreciating Raoul's bravery, and asked if he knew that every wound healed in Mira. He warned Raoul that he couldn't fight them all alone. Raoul, however, simply told Jeremy that he thought he was the one who was confused. He bet that Jeremy and his knights hadn't even trained since arriving in Mira. Jeremy was surprised and asked how Raoul knew that. Raoul pointed out that the soldiers shaking in their boots, even after their wounds had healed, were clear evidence that they weren't accustomed to death. Jeremy, realizing that Raoul not only knew combat but could also see through everything, understood that Raoul was a real threat. He ordered his man to cover him from the back, and the man replied that he would. Jeremy then jumped into the fray, launching his sword at Raoul. He covered himself with his sword as Jeremy and his men continuously attacked, slashing his face, arms, and every part of his body. One of the men saw an opening and rushed forward to attack, but Jeremy shouted for him to stop. However, it was too late. The man was cut in half by a swift swing of the sword. Jeremy angrily called his man a fool, but knew there was no time to waste. He quickly used his Randall sword vision, skill, and activated the shooting star skill. Raoul was surprised for a moment, but blocked the attack with his sword, mentally telling Jeremy to bring it on. Jeremy relentlessly attacked with shooting star, a powerful skill known for its effectiveness in 1v1 combat. Raoul noticed he was struggling, even with his psychokinesis, but he knew he had to keep up, despite feeling that he was dominating the fight. His plan was to press Jeremy back relentlessly, glaring at him, which only made Jeremy angrier. Jeremy shouted, asking what was up with Raoul's arrogant eyes. But Raoul simply replied, 100%. Jeremy, confused, asked what Raoul meant by that. Raoul swung his sword forward, making Jeremy throw his weapons in the air. As Jeremy looked up to see his weapons, Raoul pierced his sword into the ground. The system then showed that Raoul's skill examination had been 100% completed, and the copycat skill was ready to use. Raoul activated his psychokinesis to grab Jeremy's weapons out of the air, surprising Jeremy. The weapons flew directly into Raoul's hands. The system then prompted him to activate the copycat skill and copy the exact moves, engraving the skill into his decks. Raoul activated the Randall sword skill, shooting star, grade B, and aimed the weapons at Jeremy. A powerful attack hit Jeremy in return. Shocked, Jeremy asked how Raoul had done it, recognizing the attack as shooting star. In pain, Jeremy covered the attack with his arms and shouted, asking who had betrayed them, and taught Raoul that sword skill. Raoul appeared beneath Jeremy and told him that he had taught himself. Jeremy, still confused, asked what he meant, but Raoul just stabbed him in the side and pulled the sword out, causing Jeremy to kneel on the ground. The system showed that Raoul had received a rank, a bonus called Randall Sword Skill, Shooting Star Grade B Mastery, leveling it up to Intermediate Level 1. He had successfully engraved the skill into his skill decks and was told to equip it in the skill deck selection slot for continuous use. Raoul looked at Jeremy, thinking that it was over. Using the overpowered Rank S skill, Copycat, was difficult. He knew that Copycat was a skill he learned through the skill decks, allowing him to copy an opponent's skill. However, it could only copy one skill at a time, and once activated, he couldn't lose sight of the target. If he did, the examination rate would reset. That's why he didn't even blink while taking Jeremy's attacks. It was also impossible to steal a skill unless it was a one-on-one fight.